Wait, remember Cartoon Network's Mad cartoon series? Well, 15 years ago in 2010, this series premiered on Cartoon Network and brought the specific style of comedy found in Mad magazine to viewers of the network. By that, I mean jokes and satire towards celebrities, other cartoon channels and their programs, politicians, and more would all get clowned on at the expense of you being in the know of current pop culture and finding it funny. The legacy of Mad, or more specifically where and how it all started, Mad magazine, is one that has been adopted throughout multiple generations and different age groups, starting back with its first official print release in 1952. But fast forward to 2010, where we get to an animated sketch show version of Mad that fell into this middle ground zone of having references that are timely, relevant, and that a kid watching could understand, as well as being filled with references or jokes that only someone who was way older at the time or grew up in a different generation or some kid who just happens to have this wealth of knowledge from before their time would be able to truly get. There is a lot to that point that I will dive deeper into, but on top of this, the series was also in the middle ground of different age audiences. As sure, the series was made for Cartoon Network, thus it was aimed at the kids watching the network, but it also was able to push the envelope, being a bit edgier with the jokes and animation that did make it feel like it was specifically placed as this transitionary piece of media that bridges Cartoon Network and Adult Swim. With all of these mixing aspects wrapped into one show, that begs the question, who is this version of Mad even for? Me. Hi. So, what was Mad?
We pride ourselves in the fact that we have no philosophy. We have no politics, we don't take sides.
We have no morals, we have no scruples. We have no taste, we have no intelligence.
And that's about it.
For those who need a quick course in Mad history to understand the legacy of it all, let's see how we got from this comic to this TV show. First, we head back to 1952, where the first iteration of what Mad was created. For 10 cents, you could pick up Tales Calculated to Drive You Mad, the first comic book in the world of Mad created by William Gaines and Harvey Kurtzman, with William serving as the publisher and Harvey serving as the editor, as well as a writer and illustrator among the other artists who would contribute their styles to it. These comics were meant to parody and poke fun at the other popular comics of the time and before their time. It wasn't until 1955, with the 24th issue of the comic book, that it would switch the format of it to now be a magazine. This was done for a couple of reasons, but the main thing to understand about all of this was the Comics Code Authority. At the time, just like we've seen with anything too popular amongst the youth that older generations don't directly understand,
train children how to become the #1 Pokemon master in the world. Masters are those who take control of spirits in the dark realm. So Pokemon is a game that teaches children how to enter into the world of witchcraft, how to cast spells. Your children need to know there's a devil, and he hates them, and he wants to ruin their life.
Comic books were starting to be seen as dangerous. Parents were feeling a type of way, the government was feeling a type of way, and before you know it, congressional hearings about comic books were taking place. As deep as we could dive into those said hearings to see how ridiculous they are, it's the result that was the most important part we should focus on, as the comic book industry was basically forced to govern itself from being controversial and being considered not tasteful. This would be overseen by the Comics Code Authority. Specifically, this really started to hurt EC Comics, the publishing company run by William Gaines, as most of what they published would not pass what the authority would allow. But what happened with Mad next changed everything.
Mad.
Mad would end up not being affected by the Comics Code Authority. Why, you may ask? Well, it was kind of an accident. Harvey, as the editor, was potentially on the outs, getting into talks with a different type of publication to transfer out of the technical comic book industry. This other type of publication would be magazines. And with William not wanting to lose Harvey during this time, he decided to take a leap of faith with Harvey, and that was taking what Mad was as a comic book and now making it a full-on magazine. This was done to keep Harvey around as an editor for about another year. But if it weren't for Harvey getting this potential offer from another magazine in the first place, mixed with Harvey already having an interest in turning the comics into a magazine, then the go-ahead from William, according to the man himself, probably wouldn't have happened. Because of this, Mad would no longer have to worry about facing the Comics Code Authority. But William holds strong that this format change wasn't done on purpose to directly avoid it. It was just a bonus perk, a timely one at that. Now, talking about the full-on rise of Mad magazine and the impact it had could truly be its own long-form long-form documentary because the history and rich lore around it all is thicker than the 1,000-volume set of the Encyclopedia of Infinite Knowledge that Jimmy Neutron wanted. So for now, let's move forward to talking about Mad on Cartoon Network before coming back around to talk about any lingering vital bits of information from the vast history of Mad Magazine. Cartoon Network in 2010 was in a weird transitional phase, really wanting to re-establish itself with audiences as the place you'd want to be for cartoons. The whole CN Real era before this revamp, well, that's a story for another time, but for now, Cartoon Network was trying to get back to what it was known for. And throughout the 2010s, CN really asserted their dominance in this space with some of their most legendary shows that took over the animation space. We're talking about stuff like Adventure Time and Regular Show, but nestled in there was Mad, an animated sketch comedy series, which in a way was a revamp of ideals that made the magazine so popular in the first place. What could Mad do as a cartoon TV series that would make sense in the space that it was in, as well as hold true to the origins that it comes from, and being something worthy of your attention to stay locked into on the network? Well, it did exactly what the magazine would do. It drew its ideas and inspirations from the real world, looking to the famous celebrities or figures of the time and poking fun at the movies, pop culture moments, and more, all in ridiculous fashion. That, and well, combining a lot of it with stuff that you probably wouldn't get as a kid watching it at the time. What I mean is a big thing that would happen in the series is the parody mashing of two properties or movies, something that is newer and the average kid at the time would know about, and then something old, odd, or not technically made for a kid audience. So you'd get left with skits like 2012 Dalmatians, or Force Code, or I Am Lorax. All of these are mixing two different properties that either you kind of get based on knowing one of the properties involved and just enjoying the crazy stuff that happens, or the references it leans into being too far over your head at the time because of what it specifically is. For example, something like Pokemon of Interest, which combines Pokemon and the TV series out at the time called Person of Interest. That episode is from 2012. I was freshly an adult at the time, and I barely knew what Person of Interest was aside from its name. Heck, maybe my parents watched that one, but it always left you with these confusing combinations that you can have a good time with, and also cannot fully get it or understand what the other property being used in the parody even is. Sure, have a Grey's Anatomy Yu-Gi-Oh mashup. I've never fully watched Grey's Anatomy, but I know Yu-Gi-Oh, so it's funny. I personally prefer the Yogi Bear and Yu-Gi-Oh mashup Yugi Bear, but that's just because I know both properties very well, and it's really, really funny. You may be thinking to yourself, why would they do something like this? Why would they make mashups and parodies that you may not fully understand? Is there someone out there that is really going to get and fully appreciate After Bert, a parody of the awful 2013 M. Night Shyamalan film After Earth, but now it has Sesame Street characters in it? It's me. Hi, I appreciate it. But realistically, this whole setup of confusion for some was actually done so on purpose.
Bill won't take readership surveys.
There's never been a demographic study.
Or Republican.
We don't care if they're going to get it. You know, that's what makes Mad great. Maybe he would ask his father.
I like to think that we've made the kids aware of the fact that they should be very careful what they buy.
I think Mad acts as a bridge between adolescence and adulthood. And we sort of start to prime them to the fact that the world ain't such a hot place. And you're going to get burned a couple of times. And don't believe everything you read or what people say to you. Have a healthy suspicion about life.
The people behind Mad Magazine had been doing parodies that would relate to stuff that their younger readers wouldn't necessarily understand, but it caused them to be curious, to ask questions, to ask an adult, to seek out more information.
Sometimes you were making fun of stuff that were over my head.
Well, that was sort of the charm. And we figured either kids will get it or they won't, and they'll look it up and find out, or 5 years later, they're looking at old man saying, oh, now I get that joke.
In today's age, while you could still ask your parents or an adult, you now have access to things like the internet, Google, Ask Jeeves, Bing. Okay, well, no one's using that last one. But there was always this type of view when creating the parodies and jokes. They didn't care if you didn't get the joke, because one day you will. And it might make what was already absurd and funny even more so with some context. These ideas would be applied here in the concept of Mad on Cartoon Network. I'll speak more about this person a little bit later in the video, but in an interview with Comics Alliance, creator of the show Kevin Shinnick said, our target audience is actually younger than that of the magazine. What that means to me is that the things that I am going to reference are things that kids 8 to 15 know. But I want the show to be funny for everybody. To keep my sanity, I want to make myself laugh. So I think what we've done well here at the show is to really ride that line. I almost feel like I'm writing 2 shows in every episode. A lot of people have come to me, and it is such a treat when I am told this. So many parents say, I love watching the show with my kid. They're laughing at stuff that I don't get, and they get to share with me what I'm missing, and I'm laughing at stuff that they don't get, and we get to have this dialogue about what the inside joke is. The original mentality of the people behind the magazine itself can be clearly seen here within its own unique way. He can continued on to say, if I'm writing something where the dialogue is for kids, I'm going to make sure the visuals are something for adults. If the dialogue is a little funnier or more risque for the adult, then I'm going to make sure that what they are looking at is something that they recognize or enjoy. We want to give kids the feeling that they're watching something they technically shouldn't be watching, although they are allowed to watch it. That's why we aired so close to Adult Swim. The show would definitely find that balance, that fine line that made it fit perfectly between both Cartoon Network proper and Adult Swim. You could feel when watching any of the skits play out that there are jokes and references baked into it that fits the bill for both younger viewers and older viewers. Going back to the series today, yeah, there was a lot that I missed from when I was younger and a surprising amount of visuals and jokes that I wouldn't expect to see on regular Cartoon Network. So then, how would a typical episode of the series play out? Let's talk about that.
Mad. New series premieres Monday, September 6th at 8:30. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program.
Let's take a look at the first episode of the series that came out on September 6th, 2010. Right off the bat, from the intro sequence alone, you get a taste of what you're in for with all of these different styles of animation and all of these recognizable pop culture figures coming together straight out of the pages of the magazine. Wasting no time after that, we get into our first big skit that pokes fun at the 2009 film Avatar, calling it Ava-Turd, showing us these larger cutout heads of the actors as we get a more cut down story from the movie filled with jokes at the movie's expense, like poking fun at the name of the mineral unobtainium from the movie by calling it stupid namium. They take this joke a bit further by poking fun at themselves, showing that Alfred E. Newman came up with that stupid name of the mineral. Who is Alfred E. Newman? Well, I'm going to get to him next after this, so don't go anywhere. Or else. There are also a lot of other random bits that play a part in the skit, like cutting to the cat playing a keyboard, or one of the alien animals on the planet being the dog Blue from Blue's Clues. After the skit, we get some smaller sketches like an astronaut stepping in alien poop, a fake haircut product ad so that you can get the Justin Bieber look, a kid carving stuff into a tree that makes it look like it's tattoos, a skit about rejected Transformer ideas, a bit about Rapunzel's hair, but instead of from her head, it comes from her armpit, which by the way is adapted from a bit in issue 129 of Mad Magazine. We would see stuff in the show that would adapt stuff directly from the magazine. Then we have a direct-to-Disney DVD sketch called Zombie that has Bambi's mother returning from death. They also make fun of the whole Disney Vault thing here too, and I appreciate that. A celebrity birthday bit where we get silly shout-outs to people and characters like a background jellyfish from SpongeBob, Evelyn Crawford in her bottom half appearances in Tom and Jerry, and a guy who looks nothing like Zach or Cody from the Zach and Cody shows, but is somehow their stunt double. After that, we get to see a family playing a game called Ponzi Polly, where the mother ends up landing on go to jail and then the police break in and arrest her, and mixed with the unhinged art style of the bit, it got the biggest laugh from me personally. Then for more games, next it's Where's Lady Gaga, clearly trying to be like Where's Waldo, as it pokes fun at the times that she would wear these crazy ridiculous outfits that people were either split on saying that's iconic or what the heck am I looking at. And then a pumpkin gets cosmetic surgery before we get a fun Spy vs. Spy cartoon, when, by the way, Spy vs. Spy comes from Mad Magazine in case you were ever curious about that. Next we get Supervillains for Your Health, a somewhat PSA style bit where a supervillain comes to give advice about something related to health, but here it's about yawning being contagious, featuring Sinestro from the Green Lantern comics. Things quickly escalate, he tries to make a quick buck off the kids by selling them on the power of his ring having the cure for yawning, but then he just obliterates them. And finally, we end the first episode on one of those proper mashups that the series would be known for, combining the worlds of the hit series CSI Miami and iCarly, giving us, yeah, you probably guessed it, CSI Carly. Here, Carly, Sam, and Freddie from iCarly end up joining Horatio Kane from CSI Miami to help solve a case. The silly bits from the iCarly crew end up both getting in the way before somehow they end up helping solve the case. While both shows get jokes at their own expense, you can tell that something like this came together out of the mashup name title being somewhat funny. But despite not having a true purpose for why these two shows were mashed together, the main goal was to just make you laugh and be something a little bit silly, to which it achieved just that. No time here within the episode feels wasted. It's a quick 11 minutes of sketches that never overstays their welcome by going on for too long. There's this great mixture of animation that celebrates the origins of the magazine, as well as it just lets the animators shine with all of these unique and often crazy ideas. This is the basic formula to an episode though. 2 or so larger bits that could contain a mashup like we saw with CSI Carly, plus a bunch of smaller sketches that could be parodies of infomercials that sell you products, one-off ideas that are just silly like the pumpkin short, Spy vs. Spy because you need it in there, there, and so many bits that just feel right at home here, or maybe even home on another place, like Adult Swim with Robot Chicken kind of already being what this Mad cartoon is, but just for an older audience. There's a reason for that specifically, but first I mentioned the name Alfred E. Newman, and you definitely saw him appear throughout this whole episode, so who is he?
Later, Mad.
You know this face right here? Well, this is Alfred E. Newman, the mascot of Mad. The origins of this character come from old advertisements dating as far back as 1894. Any true origin of when this character was originally drawn or used before 1894 is currently lost to time, but the name Alfred E. Newman came from the inspiration of the music composer Alfred Newman, spelled slightly differently than this Alfred Newman, as well as from the Henry Morgan Show, as Henry would refer to random harmless people he would mention as Newman. Harvey Kurtzman found the character on a postcard saying that it was a face that didn't have a care in the world, except mischief. Alfred would then first be used officially on the cover of Mad number 21 in March of 1955, using the image that was originally made for advertisements now being used to poke fun at advertisements. Once Mad changed into a magazine format a few issues later, Alfred would be included on the top border of the magazine with the phrase, "What? Me worry?" written underneath. This was up until issue 30 in December of 1956, where after Harvey was no longer the editor of Mad and Al Feldstein had taken over, he wanted to turn the character into more of a mascot that all of these other brands had at the time, and thus Alfred being on the cover and being the official mascot for Mad became a real ongoing thing. With the success of the magazine continuing on from there to get bigger and bigger, we started to see where Mad would begin branching out into other forms of media. So let's mention the other ventures out there that Mad took, because maybe you didn't know that there were a couple of actual attempts to make an animated version of Mad, all before we would get to Mad on Cartoon Network. In 1974, we got to see the Mad Magazine TV special, an animated satirical half-hour of television that never got to really come out, based on this technically being a pilot for what could have been a show at the time, but one that was never picked up. Why? Well, it comes down to the way Mad pokes fun at products and advertisers, and for ABC to make the money to fund the series, they would, like any TV show, need ads during the commercial breaks. I'll speak about the whole relationship between Mad and ads more shortly, but no one wanted to have their ads play around the series, so it just lives on as this one-off special that, for what it's worth, really feels like an animated version of the magazine. Remember though, I said a couple of attempts? Well, in 1988, another pilot was in the works for a potential animated series of Mad Magazine. This time, however, it was being developed by Hanna-Barbera, and it ended up technically being lost media for quite some time, up until the end of 2017 when the YouTuber Mad Magazine Collector got his hands on the pitch book for the series, which was titled Mad Super Special, as well as in 2020 we saw a partial segment from the series in animated form that gave you a peek into what this series would have been like, or well, at least what the pilot would have been like. The clip is only 2 minutes long, and for now the pilot for Mad Super Special remains partially found. Going back to 1980 for a moment, Mad Magazine tried their hand at making a feature-length film called Mad Magazine Presents Up the Academy, a film about some up-to-no-good kids who end up getting sent to a military school as they then get into their own shenanigans there. It was made mainly in response to another comedy magazine, National Lampoon, who had just made Animal House, which saw, as Borat would say, a great success. Up the Academy, well, it wouldn't become one, as it was widely panned, and the more you look into this, the more you see Warner Brothers just wanting to make something using the Mad name, and after the film came and went, Mad disassociated themselves from the film, costing William 30 grand to have Mad Magazine Presents taken off of the title and having the use of Alfred E. Newman removed from it when the movie would be played for television. 30 grand that William says was well worth spending. They also even made fun of it in their magazine, and I can appreciate that level of petty. Also, just as a fun fact for all of you out there that appreciate a fun fact, the film was directed by Robert Downey Sr., yes, Robert Downey Jr.'s father. So that's something to discuss at the dinner table or on a long drive or whatever it is that you'd be doing. I don't know you personally, don't yell at me. Speaking of yelling,
I am a scientist! Later, Mad!
yeah, there was Mad TV as well, a sketch comedy series that came out in 1995 that ran for 14 seasons with over 300 episodes that came to an end in 2009, right before we would see the Mad cartoon series come a little over a year later on Cartoon Network. Mad TV on its own would deserve a standalone video based on everything that happened surrounding the show, the massive stars and famous people you may know today who came from Mad TV, and so much more. So what I will do is link to a friend of mine's video, Fredster2000, who made a very in-depth look into Mad TV that is well worth your time. But in general, Mad TV is sort of like the magazine in some ways, and also completely different in many others. For one, it's a sketch comedy show that aims to be more like SNL, more so than how Mad on Cartoon Network is a sketch comedy show that aims to be an animated version of the magazine. There are still plenty of callbacks, references, bits of animation, and more that all do feel like there is this love and respect for Mad's magazine origins. But Mad TV really went on to build its own legacy that can stand separately from the magazine altogether. Mad as a brand, from all these different ways of learning about it and getting into it and enjoying it, is expansive and filled with so much to learn and deep dive. All of it is fascinating, and I implore you to seek more out about Mad regarding all of these other branching bits of media, whether that be the magazine itself, Mad TV, or even Up the Academy, if you really want to explore every corner, as there is just something for everyone out there. You'll quickly understand why Mad was so influential, and even get to understand the Cartoon Network show and how that operated a bit better too. But let's go ahead and return to speaking about that though. Now, Mad for Cartoon Network was an interesting case because it fell into this middle ground of programs suitable for Cartoon Network and programs meant for Adult Swim. Mad was able to slightly push the envelope for what they could get away with more than the other shows on the network, but not pushing it so far that it should strictly be on Adult Swim. So how did that happen? It was twofold really. One, Adult Swim wanted a show like Robot Chicken that you could show in prime time, a show that wasn't as obscene or blue, that could hit a larger family audience. At the same time, Mad TV had just ended and Warner Brothers was interested in reviving the Mad brand. That was said by Kevin Chinick in the same interview with Comics Alliance. He was a man who has worn many hats in the productions that he's done, but most notably for what we're discussing today, Kevin was a writer, director, producer, and even a voice actor for Robot Chicken. So all of the stars just happened to align at the right time. Somehow my name got thrown into the mix because they thought Robot Chicken was a good model for what Mad could be. So you've probably heard the comparisons, you may have even thought it yourself, heck, I said it just a little bit ago in this video, but Mad on Cartoon Network really feels like Robot Chicken, but you know, just for a slightly younger audience. And hearing how much Kevin loves, respects, and is inspired by Mad Magazine, you can clearly see how much love he poured into making the show turn out the way it did. From the look of the series to how the credits and transitions are done, to the different art styles used in the sketches and so on. Mad really feels like a genuine love letter to the magazine, what it stood for and what it meant to so many. As we set out to bring this to life, I had some personal objectives. One of them was I wanted you to feel like you were watching the magazine brought to life on television. Mad TV existed, but it wasn't really like the magazine. It was more of an SNL type of show. There had really been no cartoon of Mad that had successfully caught on, although there had been some specials in the 70s, but Mad has been around since 1952. It's the mother of all comedy magazines. Everyone you talk to who's somebody in the comedy world, from The Simpsons to the Monty Python people to stand-ups to Weird Al, they all refer to Mad Magazine as their inspiration. Of course, as half a century will do to you, the magazine got surpassed a little bit by the people who were inspired by it. So my intention was to bring attention back to Mad Magazine and reintroduce it to a whole new generation. If I did that, I would feel that I did my job here. Kevin and the team working on Mad really went out of their way to make sure the legacy of Mad would still be felt and be a part of more generations, as print media was on a sharper decline, more so than ever thanks to the internet. There was a good mentality behind the scenes with how the production of the show went, with Kevin wanting to make sure that not only the show felt like the magazine, he wanted to make sure that the writers and what they found funny was somehow always worked into the series. Content-wise, I want you to see in one episode stop motion, flash, photo heads, and puppets, and live action stuff in an animated format. Editorially, I wanted there to be everything you loved from the magazine. A movie parody, a TV parody, a commercial, a promo, and everything in between. I tell my writers, if you find something funny, we will find a way to put it in the show. When it came to how detailed Kevin was with making sure respect was given and built into the DNA of the show, I personally want to make note that as a viewer, it can be seen and felt throughout every detail of the show, even down to how we transition between skits and sketches. Wanting this to be an extension of the magazine, the great thing was that I now had the greats from the actual magazine on staff working with me. Sergio Aragones, who had been working with the magazine since the 60s, who has such an iconic look, is still doing the drawings for us that he is known for. I tried to find a look that captured the magazine. Unlike Robot Chicken, where we do channel flips and they're static between each scene, I really want Mad to act like we're reading a magazine. We do paper rips. Sergio had that iconic bit where he drew in the margins. What we do, we have part of the screen tear away, and in only one section do you see his animation. That was my nod to that. We've got homages to Don Martin, we've got homages to Al Jaffe, we've got all these guys. The only other thing that everybody talks about is the fold-in at the end of every issue of Mad Magazine. I love that fold-in, but for my show, which is a 15-minute Fast and Furious comedy show, the fold-in was never really funny. It was cool, it was interesting, so I opted instead to do a kind of homage in the sense that all my sketches kind of fold in on themselves and fold out again. The fold-in is a clever and fun staple of Mad Magazine created by Al Jaffe. He would create these pages in the magazine that would feature some sort of question or statement accompanied by an image, but if you folded that page in the right way, it would create a new image and a new answer to the posed question. It was a well-loved idea by the readers of the magazine, and it was created out of a joke where some magazines would have fold-outs. Why not do the opposite and have more creative fun with it? So in order to give this a bit more love in the show itself, like Kevin was talking about, it just didn't work out in a way of using it for a skit or a gag. But where it really did work was how the show sometimes transitions between skits and how it all comes to an end with the credits, as the way the credits fold open and close end up trying to look similar to how the effect of the magazine would look to the reader. All of this to really make the show feel like the magazine. Kevin wasn't joking around when he said that's part of what he wanted to do, and I really think aesthetically that was accomplished. The show in general isn't perfect. There are of course going to be bits and skits that don't hit, but what may not work for some may work for others. What makes me laugh could be something that you could find not funny and vice versa. I think in general though, the show really was a fun time, and coming back to it as an adult, understanding more of the jokes and references, finding more hidden details I never originally noticed, makes the experience all the better. Since the show takes aim at pop culture, you'd think it would be hard to go back and watch because it would be dated, but having the mixes of other properties and the silly ideas they came up with kind of made the dated factor feel more irrelevant than not. For me, the beauty of Mad in any form it was in was that everything and everyone is fair game to crack jokes about or poke fun at, and the show kept that same energy.
Just everything is fair game.
It was silly, it was always supposed to just make you laugh, and whether it was in print form or on the TV screen, that was always felt. Nothing ever felt malicious, and most of those who were at the expense of those jokes would often play into it or be honored to be a part of it. Even the studios whose properties were being made fun of enjoyed it, like Warner Brothers, which to be fair, Mad was an eventual property of, as they wanted to see stuff like Man of Steel being poked fun at, or a plethora of other properties that they own. It was all just in good fun. I feel like part of the charm is seeing a Cartoon Network show poke fun at Disney Channel and Nickelodeon shows specifically. There was always something so fun and kind of playful when the networks would have these little digs at one another. It's just like with Sega and Nintendo from back in the day, with the whole Sega does what Nintendo don't slogan, which they recently brought back that type of Sega energy and attitude with the new Sonic racing game ad. One of my favorite moments in general of this kind of playful rivalry was when Cartoon Network invaded Nickelodeon with an ad for their network where the cartoons had to quickly promote Cartoon Network like they were the ones who broke into the broadcasting station themselves. It was great. The only people who probably didn't like Mad or any of their jokes throughout their existence were the advertisers. Since the magazine and later on the TV show would make fun of products, have fake ads, sponsors, and commercials, there wouldn't be many advertisers looking to work with Mad.
He won't take advertising.
We long ago decided that we can't make fun of Pepsi-Cola and take money from Coca-Cola.
And he's turned down potential millions by refusing to license the toys, cartoons, t-shirts, and other spin-offs so common in the kid marketplace.
Now, in regards to when it was a cartoon series on cable, or even with Mad TV and its setup, commercial breaks work differently on the networks. It was only ever really a big deal when it came to the magazine itself and how it operated solely based on those purchasing and supporting the magazine. But overall, going back to Mad on Cartoon Network, the series was actually a lot of fun, and as a fan of movies, all of the jokes towards all the big movies of the time, and even ones from before that time, are all really funny and have only aged better in hindsight. Okay, well, some jokes haven't. There was a thin line where the jokes did feel boundary pushing for the series, but nothing that ever felt too inappropriate for younger audiences to watch. Again, for the most part. There were a few times where I was a bit shocked with what they got away with. The large amount of different animators and animation styles really made this feel like a showcase of talents, making it a feast for the eyes the more of the series you watch. Mad on Cartoon Network ended up running from September 6, 2010 until December 2nd, 2013 for 4 seasons with 103 episodes, or technically 52 when putting two 11-minute parts together. For their 100th episode, it was actually a standalone full-length 22 minutes to celebrate the milestone, and it was a lot of fun and a cool way to go out with only a few episodes coming out afterwards before it was all over. While the series could have run for longer because of it following the Mad Magazine formula, it could work again at any point in time in the future. So could we see something like this come around again? Probably. Mad as a magazine would officially end their print run in 2019, and while the influence of Mad can always be felt from those who were inspired by it, those who have kept what the magazine was alive, there is one big takeaway that has always meant a lot to me when it comes to Mad that I personally want to help make sure is heard by more people if possible.
I also hope that a lot of kids have learned from Mad to take everything they read with a grain of salt, or maybe a ton of salt, and think for themselves.
I want to hear from you though. Were you ever a fan of Mad in any form? Let it be the magazine, Mad TV, Mad on Cartoon Network, etc. As well as let me know your thoughts on Mad on Cartoon Network specifically, and if you think it has aged well. Plus, please tell me some of your favorite sketches from it as well in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button on this video and to subscribe for more videos like this coming soon, but until then, later.
Working for Mad means just never having to grow up.